Okay, it's a little bit after 8:30. It's about 8:33, and welcome to week two already of 5.5 um, crime and drugs. And as just a reminder that our lectures from this point for weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be Tuesdays at this time, 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Our week 6 lecture will take place the Friday of week 5, but I'll be announcing that later. So for purposes of keeping up with the lectures for now, you can just be aware of the fact that um, we are going to deal with weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5, 8:30 p.m. Tuesdays till about 9:30, 9:35 p.m. around that time. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's not share that one. Let's share this one. There we go. All right, so anyway, I'm not going to go back over all the instructor information. I already shared that last week. If you have any questions or any need, you can go back and look at the open house, which is a little longer, and it provides information about most of this stuff here. You'll see that, as I announced it a few minutes ago, that beginning today, lectures will take place on Tuesday with the exception of week 6, which will be all the way in June, which will get here very fast. And then you'll see the recording from last week, and you'll see under this week 2 recording once I complete it and send it out to you. Okay, so I want to make sure there was a student who went to my classroom, and I believe it was Sunday. Yeah, it was Sunday because that was Mother's Day, and I noticed that there was someone in my room, but apparently the student didn't note that the lectures are archived and that the lecture link is not the same as the live lecture itself, but that the links vary. And then for your convenience, to make it easier on you, I convert all the lectures to YouTube where everybody can get access to them. Of course, so you have to have this link because it's a private section of YouTube that I put it on as well. All right, so let's get right down to the announcements for the week. Today we're going to talk about the history and of legislation regulating drug use and abuse, sections chapters 5 and 8 of your textbook, of which I already previously sent you the PowerPoints. I inadvertently sent you 5 and 7 first, but then I sent you 5 and 8 as to correct it. So 7 you can disregard, but it's 5 and 8 for this week of your text, drugs, crimes, and justice. And then we're going to go over the activities, regulation of drug precursors, regulation of synthetic drugs, Freakonomic of crack dealing, and federal drug activity laws. And then you have your discussion assignment, mandatory sentencing for drug-related crimes. Several of you have written some very good initial posts, and those, of course, are due by tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And your reply posts, of course, are due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And finally, you have the course project, What is Heroin? This is the first weekly project that you have, and we'll go over that in just a few minutes. I kind of referred to it last week, but I'm going to go into more detail today. Also, remember the quiz, which is timed, and once you start it, you can't stop it. Some of you, you've done pretty good with that. And then let's start strong, and then I remind you, let's finish strong. I'm here to help you every step of the way, and that you already know my motto: adversity is a springboard to success. You know why that is. If you don't know, it's because you haven't looked at the open house lecture, which I encourage you if you have not, because it tells you a little bit about how I reached the stage that I am in life um, with the adversity that has been um, in my past, or has taken place in my past. So now let's take a quick gander again at the calendar. I do remind students all the time, go to your course calendar. I did mention last week to make sure that you took your course calendar and that you printed it up so that you'll have everything. But at any rate, it gives you a reading assignment, and then if you click on it, it gives you more details in there. Some people don't realize they can click on it. And then, let's get that out of there. And then your initial post that'll do tonight, your live lecture taking place now. Your reply posts due Saturday. Then, of course, your course project and quiz are due this Sunday, the 20th, by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay? So make sure. And again, like I said, you can go all the way through. And if you went all the way through and then clicked over to June, then you'll have a peek at our lecture, well, the 29th, and then the 5th, and you'll see that there's also a live lecture on the 8th as well. This is in June. And then, of course, the quarter ends June 12th. June 12th. That is the end of this course. Okay. So I'll go over the calendar all the time, but you have access to it in your classroom. If you have any trouble with the calendar, reach out to me. Okay. Now, let's get right into the module itself. And again, let's talk about the assignments before we get into the course material. So again, let's start out with the course project. So this is your first course project, and you follow all of the steps, answer all of the questions that are involved here. And you're going to read this completely, and I'm not going to read it to you. And for this part of the course project, conduct additional research to learn more about the source and origin of heroin. Include countries, the effects drug have on the body, addictive qualities of the drug, and related information and traffic networks. Okay. Then it says, after you conduct your research, you write a paper, a minimum of 3 pages, that discusses these points, which are basically from up here. Okay. And then include at least 3 credible, reliable resources from your research other than the textbook. Do not rely or cite on information from Wikipedia. I say that, and it's in every one of your modules. And then include citations in the body of your paper, a cover page, and a reference page. Okay. So when you count these three pages, the cover page and reference page are not included in the page requirement, but are required. Okay. And then in this, to help you with this assignment, we have the CJE Drug and Crime Course Guide, which is down at the bottom of Let's see. I just saw it. Yeah, it's at the bottom of your actual uh, section for assignment. I'll show you it again. Then your discussion post, we've already discussed that. Then, of course, your quiz and your live classroom. Okay, so let's go back a minute. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. Okay, there it is down here. When you get to here, your drugs and crimes course guide helps you with information during this course. We have put together a comprehensive guide to help you, and all you have to do is click on it. All you have to do is click on it, okay? And it's right there for you. So you have no problem with researching. You can maximize your time by utilizing this source. Back to the assignments just very briefly before we go into the content. Again, there's a rubric, and the rubric tells you when the assignment is due, and then it actually gives a breakdown of how you gain your points. Notice 30 points. The total is 40, and these are basically organization content, APA citations and references. If you don't have APA, guys, you can lose your 5 points. I say this over and over and over and over, and it never fails that people submit their assignments without the citations in the body. They'll submit references, but the requirement is very clear. If you read this section, written in APA form with title page and reference page, proper spacing, and paragraph indents, all sources, says not some, all sources, properly cited as citations in the body of the paper. And you want to make sure that you do this, and then we remind you about relevant resources. If you use that guide, you're going to come up with relevant resources because we've already done the work for you. You just have to go ahead and delve into it. It's very good. It is excellent, and I commend our team for putting that together to help you out. So it's easy as 1, 2, 3. Dates on time, following the rubric, and that will lead you to successful papers or your 40 points, okay? Very, very, very important. And remember, you're going to have 40 points for week 2, week 3, week 4, and week 5. So you got 4 weeks. So gain those, 160 points. And you want to make sure that you get those for the course project. All right? I just can't stress how often students don't get that. But it is so important, and I apologize for being redundant and repetitious. I grade the papers, and I haven't had to grade any of your papers in here. But many of you in this class already know me because they've had me in other classes, and they know I'm saying the same things. The only thing different that I'm doing that I didn't do in earlier courses was I switched rubrics and created my own and designed my own rubrics to make it easier to align with the course assignment. So here's the deal. Get it in on time, follow the rubric, and you will be successful. Guarantee you. There's no conflict in the rubric or the module itself because I took the information from the module to get you focused. Okay. So now let's go over and let's take a look at the actual lesson content itself. Since we're talking about drug legislation relating to marijuana, not marijuana, but well, yeah, to drugs and so forth. And again, let's get right back down into the regulation. Now, here we go. And it talks about some drugs that you're familiar with: marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, which is grown. Marijuana, cocaine, and heroin are all from plants. Meth, on the other hand, is a combination um, of drugs, or it is a household product or chemicals utilized that you already have um, to make these drugs. Now think about that. Look at the elements that are included to make meth, which gets you to understand why it affects your mind. Look at the first one. It says paint thinner. Paint thinner. Now think about this. This is something that you're ingesting into your body. Paint thinner, acetone, ammonia, iodine crystals, red phosphorus, drain cleaner, Drano. Think about it. You put this in your sink to unclog it and to clean it, but you instead put it in your body, and this is part of the manufactured drugs. Lithium. Lithium, and you should know what lithium is. You find that in batteries all the time. You pick up your batteries, and your batteries will say alkaline or either lithium. The one I have in my hand, this is a AA battery, and it's an alkaline battery. But the point of the matter is I'm just trying to get you focused on something so that you understand. And then there are ingredients from cold medication. I had a young man once, going back into the 60s. This is like 69 when I was working in the law firm in the mailroom. And this young man used to get high on syrup. I don't mean maple syrup. I'm talking about cough syrup. And he would drink the bottles of it. And then he would zone out. Eventually, his mind was altered, and it changed so that he couldn't even remember his own name. And so anyway, talking about the cooking process, changes the chemical makeup ingredients to produce rock-like or powder substances, which can be ingested through smoking, snorting, and injection. One of the drugs that is prevalent and that has actually reached the stage now that it is probably it's a cheap drug, but it is a manufactured drug combined with the plant. It's cocaine. It's crack cocaine, and I can tell you that when I was a police officer in this town was known as the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs of Chicago, and there were many houses in that town where people actually on their stoves would cook crack cocaine, and they would include these chemicals and produce it on the stove like as if they were cooking dinner, and result in this rock. When I was a kid, we used to have this thing called starch, not the spray starch, but it was in a box, and you can still see it. It's cornstarch. A company called Argo put it out, and now they're Conagra. But anyway, people could chew this, and it's like a little rocky thing, and or they can snort it, chop it, they could grind it up, or they can put it in with the liquid and then inject it. But the fact of the matter is this crack cocaine has created a dilemma in the criminal justice world, where much of our violence that take place, particularly dealing with the gangs, is relating to the distribution of crack cocaine. And because what people can do, they can take their $10, $20 and they can buy a rock or two and then use it for whatever. And it is devastating because once these people go on these trips with these manufactured products like crack cocaine, it alters the mind and it sends them on trips, and they zone out. I'm sure everybody in this class can relate to it. I can relate to it because I have had a sister who, in 1994, she lost her life. She took the crack cocaine and resulted in a brain aneurysm where she ended up dying because of that. Never was conscious, and so it's at an epidemic level right now. And again, many of the urban areas where you have the gangs operating, they became more violent because then they became distributors of the crack cocaine throughout the neighborhood, and they will guard their territory or clientele by using high-powered weapons. Now they're using even automatic and semi-automatic weapons, and it's big money. It's big money, and so it made the war on drugs very difficult. Now we got the opioid issue, which, as a matter of fact, tomorrow at our campus in Romeoville, I'll be attending a session relating to that, and we're going to, for those of you who are in the area here, you can check it out. But we're having some heroin training on tomorrow, where we're going to talk about the effects of heroin on people and their lives. So it's a very serious thing, and it's very, 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 very dangerous, very, 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 very addictive, very, very, very mind altering. So in order to deal with the manufacture of meth, federal and state laws have passed limiting the substances that are used. And so what it amounts to is that if you can't get the substance to make the drug, you can't make it. However, here's the thing that is problematic, is that oftentimes these things are innocent things by themselves, like drain cleaner, battery acid, iodine crystals, and things of that nature. But when you mix them together, and so notice what this says. This act requires, the Epidemic Act in 2005, requires retailers of non-prescription. Now remember, we're talking about non-prescription stuff, containing pseudoephedrine, amphetamine, and others, to place those drugs behind the counter. Because what people were doing is that they were coming in the drugstores and they were stealing those things, and they were using those things to make and manufacture these drugs. And so in order to get these things, consumers have to show some identification for purchases. And so these laws, it says, have reduced meth labs. And by the way, the other issue with meth labs is this, is that it not only produces dangerous drugs, but it also oftentimes resulted in explosions that killed the occupants of the house and other people in the community. So it's a very, very serious issue. Okay. So all of the states have begun to work on the regulation of these items to try to minimize it. Haven't been very successful with it. And so we continue with what we call the war on drugs. Oftentimes, students will comment about the fact that we are losing the war on drugs, and the reason is because you see the effects. But I'm going to tell you something. There's a whole lot of money involved. I mentioned last week that here in Chicago we had 2 Chicago police officers who were indicted. These are law enforcement officers who were indicted for taking drugs from individuals, and they were taking these drugs, and then they were um, taking them the cash and the drugs, and they were redistributing the drugs themselves. So what I'm saying is that when you have your law enforcement people, or when you have your criminal justice professionals participating in distributing the drugs, it's a problem. The town that I was again referring to again, that I won't mention the name, but the fact of the matter is, well, you can go and look at it. It's called Ford Heights. But if you go back and look at it, you will discover that the chief of police was indicted for taking bribes from drug dealers, and that the police department, which wasn't very big, I think it had about 10 officers, about 7 or 8 of them ended up going to prison for accepting money and stuff like that. So here's the point, is that you're going to eventually get caught, and then you're going to end up going to the penitentiary. So anyway, let's talk about synthetic drugs for a little bit here. And again, these are drugs that are manufactured through the chemical process and not from plants. So synthetic cannabinoids, it says, are chemical compounds created in a lab and then supposedly sold as legal alternatives to marijuana, which, by the way, you already know what's happening with marijuana. Many jurisdictions, including Illinois, moving towards legalizing. One of the earlier states, Colorado, and also so did California. I think Massachusetts. There are a few other states that have, and if not, they're moving toward it. And even now, there are senators, U.S. senators, who are moving to pass a law to legalize marijuana, because here's the conflict, is that even though the states that I mentioned and others that you may know about have passed laws that legalize marijuana, the feds can still come in and arrest those individuals. So it's kind of like a battle between the state and federal law. And so with the issue of marijuana, they've discovered that there's going to be some, marijuana is just like alcohol, basically, is what it's going to turn out to be, is that used responsibly, they said it's not going to hurt you. I don't care. I don't drink alcohol even, and I'm 68 years old. I never have. And I don't care if they legalize marijuana all day long. I'm not going to do it, because I've seen some effects on a long-term basis that it can have with people. But anyway, digressing a little bit on that, but these synthetic are sold under such names as K2, Spice. We used to call it a whole lot of different names when I was coming up. But at any rate, there's a whole lot of adverse effects. And what happens is when you take these synthetic drugs into your body, one of the first things it does is attack the heart. And medical science people will tell you it will do things like increase the heart rate. It will send you into cardiac arrest, and elevate your blood pressure as well. And then you can end up going into a seizure and then become unconscious, and the rest, then you pass out and then you die. So it says efforts to combat the spread of synthetic drugs deals with the Synthetic Drug Abuse Prevention Act, which permanently places 26 types of synthetic cannabinoids and cathinoids into Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act, CSA, which you guys are familiar with from week 1. And then 43 of the states, and growing, have taken action to control one or more of the synthetic cannabinoids. And so it is an ongoing battle that's taking place. Look at this. Um, some of the things like bath salts. Is an informal street name for a family of manufactured drugs. And these bath salts are intentionally mislabeled as bath salts, plant food, air freshener in order to trick purchasers into thinking that the drugs are mild. But in reality, these things are sniffed, snorted, and or smoked or taken in orally. They can result in agitation, insomnia, irritability, dizziness, depression, paranoia, delusional, suicide thoughts. People have taken their lives over this. We had a thing called purple haze when I was coming up, and this purple haze, PCP, was something that did the same kind of thing. It would send you on what we call a trip, and you could end up with what they're saying here in this article here, this piece here, is that a highly publicized incident in Miami called the zombie attack took place where a naked man high on bath salts, this same kind of thing happened with this PCP, chewed on the face of a homeless man in an 18-minute attack before he was shot. And it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. In 2011, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, published a final order exercising its emergency scheduling authority for 3 synthetic stimulants used to make bath salts, including methadone, 3,4, and then MDPV and methadone. And the point of the matter is that the point is this, is that these items will kill you or put you in such a trip that you don't even know who you are. So this video, I'm going to come back to it in just a few minutes. But let's go to the federal law activities, understanding of the content by using these flashcards. Remember, I told you they're good things that help you. And then, the first federal law to regulate psychoactive drugs impose a tax on opium and cocaine and require manufacturers, importers, pharmacists, and physicians. And then you type in your answer, and then you go next. So it's telling you to click on it to answer. So, any ideas? You can type it in the chat box. What's it called? Anybody want to take a shot at it? We've kind of already talked about it, but it's in your reading. What do you think? Nobody wants to take it on? Well, the answer is up here. And I'm not going to type it in, but you can go back, and I just showed you it just a few seconds ago. So I'm not going to go on from there. But you need to go over each of these so that you can make sure that you get an understanding. And if you put the wrong answer in, it will let you know. Okay. So then once you put an answer in, you click next. It won't go until until you do that. All right. So I'm not going to take the time to go over that with you in this class because you can take that on your own time. So now let's go into crack dealing. I already kind of talked to you about that. Let's see if we can get this TED Talk up. I was able to look at it earlier. Let's see if we can. It's about 20 minutes. Okay, let's look at this. Let's take a few minutes. I'm going to take off my headset. When I take off my headset, you tend to be able to see the videos. You'll be happy to know that I'll be talking not about my own tragedy, but other people's tragedy. It's a lot easier to be lighthearted about other people's tragedy than your own. I don't want to keep it in the spirit of confidence. So if you believe the media accounts, being a drug dealer in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic was a very glamorous life, in the words of Virginia Pastrell. There's money, there's drugs, guns, women, you name it, jewelry, bling bling, it had it all. Okay? What I'm going to tell you today is that, in fact, based on 10 years of research, a unique opportunity to go inside a gang, to see the actual books, the financial records of the gang, that the answer turns out not to be that being in the gang was a glamorous life, but I think more realistically, that being in a gang, selling drugs for a gang, is perhaps the worst job in all of America. And that's what I'd like to convince you of today. Okay, so there's three things I want to do. First, I want to explain how and why crack cocaine had such a profound influence on inner city gangs. Secondly, I want to tell you how somebody like me came to be able to see the inner workings of a gang. It's an interesting story, I think. And then third, I want to tell you in a very superficial way about some of the things we found when we actually got to look at the financial records, the books of the gang. Okay, so before I do that, just one warning, which is that this presentation has been rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. It contains adult themes, adult language. Given who's up on the stage, you'll be delighted to know that, in fact, there'll be no nudity, barring a unexpected wardrobe malfunction time. Okay, so let me start by talking about crack cocaine and how it transformed the gang. Okay, and to do that, you have to actually go back to a time before crack cocaine in the early 80s. Look at it from the perspective of a gang leader. Okay, so being a gang leader in the inner city wasn't such a bad deal in the mid-'80s, the early 80s, I would say. Now, you had a lot of power, you got to beat people up, you got a lot of prestige, a lot of respect. But the thing is, there was no money in it. Okay? The gang had no way to make money. You couldn't charge dues to the people in the gang because the people in the gang didn't have any money. You couldn't really make any money selling marijuana. Marijuana's too cheap, it turns out. There's no market for being. You can't get rich selling marijuana. You couldn't sell cocaine. So cocaine's a great product, powder cocaine, but you got to know rich white people. And most of the inner city gang members didn't know any rich white people. They couldn't sell that market. You couldn't really do petty crime either, because a petty crime is a terrible way to make a living. So as a result, as a gang leader, you had, power, it's a pretty good life. But the thing was, at the end, you were living at home with your mother. And so it wasn't really a career. It was something that, there was limits to how powerful sport you could be if you had to live at home with your mother. Okay. Then along comes crack cocaine. Okay? And in the words of Malcolm Gladwell, crack cocaine was the extra chunky version of tomato sauce for the inner city. Okay? Because crack cocaine was an unbelievable innovation. I don't have time to talk about it today. But if you think about it, I would say that in the last 25 years, of every invention or innovation that's occurred in this country, the biggest one in terms of impact on the well-being of people who live in the inner city was crack cocaine. Okay, for the worse, not for the better, for the worse. It had a huge impact on life. So what was it about crack cocaine? It was a brilliant way of getting the brain high. Okay, because you could smoke crack-cane and you can smoke crack cocaine, you can't smoke powder cocaine, and smoking is a much more efficient mechanism of delivering a high than is snorting it. And it turned out there was this audience that didn't know it wanted crack cocaine, but when it came, it really did. And it was a perfect drug you could buy the cocaine that went in for $1, sell it for $5, highly addictive. The high was very short. So for 15 minutes, you get this great high.
And then when you come down, all you want to do is get high again. Okay, it created a wonderful market, and for the people who were there running the gang, it was a great way, seemingly, to make a lot of money. These are the people on the top. Okay, so this is where we enter the picture. Not really me. I'm really a big player in all this. My co-author, Sudhir Venkatesh, is the main character. Okay, so he was a math major in college who had a good heart and decided he wanted to get a sociology PhD. Came to the University of Chicago. So the 3 months before he came to Chicago, he had spent following the Grateful Dead. And in his own words, he looked like a freak. Okay, he's a South Asian, very dark-skinned South Asian, big man, and he had hair, in his words, down to his ass. Okay, he defined all kinds of boundaries. Was he black or white? Was he man or woman? It was really a curious sight to be seen. So he showed up at the University of Chicago, and the famous sociologist J250 was doing a book that involved surveying people all across Chicago. And he took one look at Sudhir, who was going to go do some surveys for him, and decided he knew exactly the place to visit, which was one of the toughest, most notorious housing projects, not just in Chicago, but in the entire United States. So Sudhir, the suburban boy who never really been in the inner city, dutifully took his clipboard and, walked down to this housing project, gets to the first building. The first building, well, there's nobody there, but he hears some voices up in the stairwell. And so he climbs up the stairwell, and he comes around the corner and finds a group of young African American men playing dice. Okay. This is about 1990, peak of the crack epidemic. It's a very dangerous job being in a gang. You don't like to be surprised. You don't like to be surprised by people coming around the corner, and the mantra was shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. Now Sudhir was lucky. He was such a freak, and that clipboard probably saved his life because he figured no other rival gang member would be coming up to shoot him with a clipboard. So his greeting was not particularly warm, but they did say, well, okay, let's hear your questions on your survey. So I kid you not, the first question on the survey that he was sent to ask was, how do you feel about being poor and black? Makes you wonder about academics. So the choice of answers was very good. What Sudhir found out is, in fact, that the real answer was the following. The survey was not, in the end, going to be what got Sudhir off the hook. He was held hostage overnight in the stairwell. There was a lot of gunfire. There were a lot of philosophical discussions he had with the gang members. By morning, the gang leader arrived, checked out Sudhir, and decided he wasn't no threat, and they'd let him go home. So Sudhir went home, took a shower, took a nap. And you and I probably faced with a situation where, well, I guess I never had a dissertation on the Grateful Dead. I've been following for the last 3 months. Sudhir, on the other hand, got right back, walked down to the housing project, went up to the second floor, and said, hey guys, I had so much fun hanging out with you last night. I wonder if I could do it again tonight. And that was the beginning of what turned out to be a beautiful relationship that involved Sudhir living in the housing project on and off for 10 years, hanging out in crack houses, going to jail with the gang members, having the car window shot out of his car, having the police break into his apartment, steal his computer disks, you name it. But ultimately, the story has a happy ending for Sudhir, who became one of the most respected sociologists in the country, and especially for me, as I sat in my office with my Excel spreadsheet open, waiting for Sudhir to come and deliver to me the latest load of data that you would get from the game. One of the most unequal co-authoring relationships ever, but I was glad to be the beneficiary. Okay. So what do we find? What do we find in the game? Well, let me say one thing. So what we got, we really got access to everybody in the game. We got an inside look at the game from the very bottom up to the very top. They trusted Sudhir in ways that really no academic had ever, or really anybody, any outsider had ever earned the trust of this game. And to the point where they actually opened up, but what's interesting for me is their books, their financial records that they kept, and they made them available to us. We not only could study them, but we could ask them questions about what was in them. So if I have to kind of summarize very quickly in the short time I have, what the sort of the bottom line of what I take away from the gang is that if I I had to draw a parallel between the gang and any other organization, it would be that the gang is just like McDonald's, okay, in a lot of different respects, the restaurant McDonald's. Okay, so first, in one way, which isn't maybe the most interesting way, but it's a good way to start, is in the way it's organized, the hierarchy of gang, the way it looks. So here's what the org chart of the gang looks like. I don't know if any of you know very much about org charts, but if you were to kind of strip down and simplify McDonald's org chart, this is exactly what the org chart would look like. It's amazing, but the top level of the gang, they actually call themselves the board of directors. and Shadir says it's not like these guys had a very sophisticated kind of view of like what happened in American corporate life, but they had seen movies like Wall Street, and they kind of learned like a little bit about what it was like to be in the real world. Now, below that board of directors, you've got the essentially what are regional VPs, people control next to the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago. Now, Shadir got to know very well the guy who had the unfortunate assignment of trying to take the Iowa franchise, which it turned out for this black gang was not one of the more brilliant financial endeavors that they had to do. Okay. The thing that really makes the gang seem like McDonald's is its franchises. The guys who are running, the local gangs, the 4 square block by 4 square block areas, they're just like the guys in substance who are running the McDonald's. They are the entrepreneurs. They get the exclusive property rights to control the drug selling. They get the name of the gang behind them for merchandising and marketing. And they're the ones who basically make the profit or lose the profit depending on how good they are at running the business. Now, the group I really want you to think about are the ones at the bottom, the foot soldiers. Okay, these are the teenagers typically who'd be standing out on the street corner selling the drugs. Extremely dangerous work. And important to note that almost all of the weight, all of the people in this organization are at the bottom. Okay, just like McDonald's. So in some sense, the foot soldiers are a lot like the people who are taking the order at McDonald's. And it's not just by chance they're like them. In fact, in these neighborhoods, they'd be the same people. So the same kids who were working in the gang were actually, at the very same time, they would typically be working part-time at a place like McDonald's. Okay, which already, I think, foreshadows the main result that I've talked about what a crappy job it was being in the gang. Because obviously, if being in the gang was such a wonderful, lucrative job, why in the world would these guys moonlight at McDonald's? Okay, so what do the wages look like? So you might be surprised, but based on the actual, being able to talk to them and to see their records, this is what it looks like in terms of the wages. The hourly wage the foot soldiers were earning was $3.50 an hour. It was below the minimum wage. Okay, and this is well documented. It's easy to see by the patterns of consumption they have. It really is not fiction, it's fact. There was very little money in the gang, especially at the bottom. Now, if you manage to rise up, say, be that local leader, the guy who's equivalent of the McDonald's franchisee, you'd be making $100,000 a year. And that, in some ways, was the best job you could hope to get if you were growing up in one of these neighborhoods as a young black male. If you manage to rise to the very top, $200,000 or $400,000 a year is what you'd hope to make. Truly, you would be a great success story. And one of the sad parts of this is that, indeed, among the many other ramifications of crack cocaine, is that the most talented individuals in these communities, this is what they were striving for. They weren't trying to make it in legitimate ways because there were no legitimate channels out. This was the best way out. It actually was the right choice, probably, to try to make it out this way. You look at this, the relationship with McDonald's breaks down here. The money looks about the same. Why is this such a bad job? Well, the reason it's such a bad job is that there's somebody shooting at you a lot of the time. Okay? So they're shooting at you. What are the death rates? Okay? We found in our gang, and admittedly, this was not really sort of a standard situation. This was a game of a time of intense violence, of a lot of gang wars. And this gang actually became quite successful, but there were costs. And so the death rate, not to mention the rate of being arrested, sent to prison, being wounded, the death rate in our sample was 7% per person per year. You're in the gang for 4 years, you expect to die with about a 25% likelihood. Okay, that is about as high as you can get. So this, for comparison's purposes, let's think about some other walk of life where you may expect might be extremely risky. Like let's say that you were a murderer, you were convicted of murder and you're sent to death row. It turns out that the death rates on death row from all causes including execution, 2% a year. Okay, so it's a lot safer being on death row than selling drugs out on the street. Okay, that makes you pause, gives you some pause. And those of you who believe that a death penalty is going to have an enormous deterrent effect on crime. Now, to give you a sense of just how bad the inner city was during crash, and I'm not really focusing on the negatives, but really there's another story to tell you there. If you look at the death rates just of random young black males growing up in the inner city in the United States, the death rates during crash were about 1%. That's extremely high. This is violent death. It's unbelievable in some sense. To put it into perspective, if you compare this to the soldiers in Iraq, for instance, right now fighting the war, 0.5%. So in some very literal way, the young black men who were growing up in this country were living in a war zone, very much in the sense of the way that the soldiers over in Iraq are fighting a war. Okay, so why in the world, you might ask, would anybody be willing to stand out on the street corner selling drugs for $3.50 an hour with a 25% chance of dying over the next 40 minutes? Why would they do that? Okay? And I think there are a couple answers. I think the first one is that they got fooled by history. It used to be the gang was a rite of passage, that the young people controlled the gangs, that as you got older, you dropped out of the gang. So what happened was the people who happened to be in the right place at the right time, the people who happened to be leading the gang in the mid to late 80s became very, very wealthy. And so the logical thing to think was that, well, the next generation, so they're going to age out of the gang like everybody else does, and the next generation is going to take over and get the wealth. Okay? So there's striking similarities, I think, to the internet boom. Right? The first set of people in Silicon Valley got very, very rich. And then all my friends said, maybe I should go do that too. And they were very cheap for stock options that never came. Okay? And sometimes that's what happened exactly to the set of people we were looking at, is that they were willing to start at the bottom, just like, say, a lawyer at a law firm. A first-year lawyer is willing to start at the bottom, work 80-hour weeks for not so much money, because they think they're going to make partner. But what happened was the rules changed, and they never got to make partner. Indeed, the same people who were running all of the major gangs in the late 1980s are still running the major gangs in Chicago today. They never passed on any of the wealth. So everybody got stuck at that $3.50 an hour job, and it turned out to be a disaster. The other thing the gang was very, very good at was marketing and trickery. And so, for instance, one thing the gang would do is, the gang leaders would have big entourages, and they drive fancy cars, and they have fancy jewelry. So what Sadira eventually realized as he hung out with them more is that really they didn't own those cars, they just leased them, because they couldn't afford to own the fancy cars, and they didn't really have gold jewelry, they had gold-plated jewelry. It goes back to the real versus the fake real. And really, they did all sorts of things to trick the young people into thinking what a great deal the gang was going to be. So, for instance, they would give a 14-year-old kid, they'd give him a whole, roll of bills to hold. That 14-year-old kid would say, oh, well, Hugh kid was spent, hey, look at all the money I got in the gang. It wasn't his money until he spent it, and then essentially he was indentured to the gang and sort of an indentured servant for a while. Okay, so I have a couple minutes. Let me do one last thing I thought I'd have time to do, which is to talk about what we learn more generally about economics from the study of the game. Okay, so economists tend to talk in technical words. Often our theories fail quite miserably when we go into data. But actually, what's kind of interesting is that in this setting, it turned out that some of the economic theories that worked not so well in the real economy work very well in the drug economy. In some sense, because it's unfettered capitalism. Here's an economic principle. This is one of the basic ideas in labor economics. It's called the compensating differential. It's the idea that basically the incremental wages the worker requires to make them indifferent between performing two tasks, one which is more unpleasant than the other. That's what you call a compensating differential. That's why we think garbage men might be paid more than people who work in parks. Okay? So in the words of the gang, one of the members of the gang, I think makes this clear. So it turns out, I'm getting ahead of myself. It turns out in the gang, when there's a war going on, that they actually pay the foot soldiers twice as much money. Okay, it's exactly this concept. They're not willing to be at risk. So here's, in the words of the gang member, captured quite nicely. He says, "You just stand around here when all this shit, shooting, all this shit's going on. No, right. So if I'm going to be asked to put my life on the line, then profit the cash, man." So Essentially, I think the gang member says it much more articulately than does the economist about what's going on. Here's another one. So economists talk about game theory, that every two-person game has a match equilibrium. Here's the translation you get from the gang member. They're talking about the decision of why they don't go shoot. One thing that turns out to be a great business tactic in the gang is to go and just shoot in the air, just shoot guns in the other gang's territory. All the people are afraid to go by the guns there, they're going to come up your neighbor. So, but here's what he says about why they don't do that. He says, if we start shooting around there in the other gang's territory, nobody, and I mean you dig it, nobody's going to step on their turf. But we got to be careful because they can shoot around here too, and then we all fucked. Okay? So that's exactly the same concept. But then again, sometimes economists get it wrong. So one thing we observed in the data is that it looks like, in terms of the gang leader always got paid. Okay, he always, no matter how bad it was economically, he always got himself paid. So we had some theories related to cash flow and lack of access to capital markets and things like that. And so we asked the gang member, well, why did you always get paid? Your workers don't always get paid. His response is, you got all these niggers below you who want your job, you dig? If you start taking bosses, you see how much weakness shit. Okay? I thought about it. CEOs often pay themselves $1 million bonuses even when companies are losing a lot of money. And it never really occurred to economists that this idea of weak and shit could really be important. So maybe weak and shit is an important hypothesis.
Okay. And that is kind of an interesting format there. Hope you were able to get it. But here's something that you should be aware of that's very serious. I can tell you that there's a lot of reality in what he said. I was in various levels of this. At one point, I was a criminal defense lawyer, and I represented gangs. And many of the gangs, they would pay the lawyers in cash. They would pay 20. That's their form of money. And it was because they were making the money on the streets. But here's what you need to hear, is that these young people would, rather than working at McDonald's, would have this blingage, as they point out so true, were shiny but not really of substance. It said gold-plated rather than solid gold. And these people didn't know the difference. They would also get them something that he didn't mention, and that is Jordans or some kind of tennis shoe that they never could have gotten before. And it was business for the gang leaders because they were going to ultimately make the money. And then the other thing is, we used to always tell people this, that the kings in chess are, they're going to be protected. You got the knights protecting them, you got the rooks, but then here's the people on the street. Who's protecting them? Nobody. They're expendable, and they go down. They go down by either accepting jail terms, and they come back out again, get back to it again. And then the other thing is this, is that they're the ones who's on the line. There were many of the leaders who actually, for fronts, they would create record labels, like gangster rap, a lot of those. That's how you got the issues of Biggie and some Tupac and some of these other artists. But anyway, the point of the matter is that there was violence involved, and they were converting the monies that they were making into, quote, legitimate businesses. They had car dealerships. They would buy hotels. They would buy other housing and things of that nature. The point of the matter is that in the meantime, the poor individuals on the streets, they would go down. That was it. Then someone else would be waiting to get their job afterwards. But see, here's one of the dilemmas that is taking place right now, and that is this: is that there are so many innocent individuals. I say this all the time that when it's really nice weather here in our Chicago area, that I know I'm going to turn on the television and the news is going to open up with someone being shot. You know, unfortunately, who that someone is? A 5-year-old or a little kid. Um, there was a kid in East Chicago, Indiana, which is very close to the Chicago area, was out playing basketball. And that's all he did. He played basketball, 11-year-old kid. And while he was out there playing, um, there was a drive-by. And see, and that's what happens is people are shooting each other up in their territories. It's a war that's taking place there. And so he became an innocent victim of this because he was in the crossfire. Listen to me good when I'm about to tell you. When I was a lawyer representing some of these people, I would ask them, why did you shoot that other person? There would be two answers. One answer would be, well, they weren't my intended target, but in order for me to shoot who I needed to shoot, I had to shoot them first because they were in the way. What's the mindset here? And then the other thing is this, is that then they were saying, I wasn't really intending on shooting them. I was trying to shoot somebody else, but I missed. So the point of the matter is that once again, little kids, there are even people, listen to me, people, who are sitting in their own, just like right now, I'm sitting here in my living room area by the window, and I'm in a suburban area. But in the city, I'm sitting by the window doing this lecture. It could be interrupted by a bullet coming through the window, and it could be from anywhere. The point of the matter is, and they don't even have to be shooting at me. They're just shooting, and the bullets don't determine their targets always. And so anyway, the innocent people are killed. So that's one of the dilemmas, people, that's taking place. And so with this crack cocaine issue in the urban areas, it's like, man, it's just it's an economic issue created by some illegal law enforcement people, some very wealthy individuals who are living on what we call the Gold Coast or in the ritzy area, while the people in the hood knocking off each other. And when they're not doing that, then they're distributing it to people who are getting high, whose mind is altered based on the things that we talked about earlier. So it gets to be a real serious issue. In that video, I really liked it. I remember the first time I saw it, I said, wow, I like this, and I'm glad they put it into the class because it explains the situations that we're dealing with here, okay? And so that kind of lays out one of the issues that is very, very serious here. I want to just point out to you, I gave you PowerPoints, which basically goes over some of the things that I said. And I said with this class, I will look at the PowerPoints before class. I recommend you look at them, and you can take them out, and you'll see things that will put in perspective and put in and help you to understand the things that are taking place here. And they lay in some specific issues with the war on drugs and things that are taking place. But I can tell you this, going back even further, and then, I mean, it's going all the way back to the 1800s. I mean, it's been around a long time. Then you got prohibition. Then now we're dealing with opium, and opioids are really, 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 really serious, and we're dealing with that because what's happened is that it's reached the suburban communities, and there are people who are not caught so much up in the crack cocaine, but that it's affecting the suburban areas, and so now there is some, as I say, studies that deal with that, and then you deal with things like heroin, as I said, that we are having a seminar on. So you could go down, and it talks about even one back here to what happened here. Illinois, the first state to pass laws against smoking opium. Ohio, rather, the first state. Look at when it was, 1875. Illinois made selling or giving away cocaine without a prescription illegal, 1897. I'm trying to show you something, people. The deal is not necessarily the laws, but it's what's happening with the people. This book, The Jungle, I remember I had to read this when I was he was in high school or even 8th grade. Talks about the meat packing industry and talks about all the ingredients that were involved, and deals with the Food and Drug Administration and all these different things. The point of the matter is, guys, is that there are laws on the books. The Harrison Tax Act, one of my favorites, regulating the use of psychoactive drugs, the Harrison Tax Act of 1914. And then some key decisions that we studied in law school, and then when I was in college, taking constitutional law. And then these are different agencies, and it goes on. So what am I saying here? You will find that you got these schedules. Schedule 1, illegal drugs not used in medical practice. There's no medical use at all. Then most dangerous prescription drugs, which are abused. Mixtures with low levels of narcotics of 1 and 2, which result in 5. And then they talk about the war on drugs and crack babies. I've seen many of those as well. From that town that I was in, there were a bunch of people who were having kids that were crack babies, and some very serious effects for those children. Anyway, the war continues on and on and on. So these are just a few things to historically give you an understanding. All right. Then finally, the sentencing, drug offenders. And I'm not going to go over that, but you should be aware of the fact that the individuals who are what we call drug dealers, I'm talking about on high levels, not the little pawns, not the street people, but the actual ones who produce or found in their possession with large quantities, or what we call dealer quantities. They're the ones who get the heavier sentence. And you'll discover that when you go through that and when you read that chapter in your book as well. And so that's it for today. Yes, my keyword is I've talked about a whole lot. Crack cocaine. Don't tell me just cocaine. Crack cocaine. And so any questions about your assignment? I've spent a lot of time going over that, making sure that you understand it. I've given you some of my experience, and that video, if you didn't get anything else, I think, and if you have trouble getting it while in the class, go back and look at it again. It's very, very interesting. Again, see, crack cocaine is a very serious thing now, and it relates to, as I said earlier before the video, it relates to a lot of our violence that takes place in our inner cities. So it's about 9:42, so I'm going to say good night to you, and I will see you next week at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Good night.
So